The giant space arena floated above planet Koroth like a massive metal moon. Thousands of alien creatures filled the floating seats that surrounded the fighting ground below. Their excited voices created a noise that could be heard across 3 star systems. This was the most important day in the galaxy because today was the start of the Death Games. Every 10 years, warriors from across the universe came to fight in these games. The winner would become the supreme champion and rule over 3 entire star systems with billions of people living on hundreds of planets. The losers would die in the arena and be forgotten forever. In the contestant waiting room, 12 fighters sat in chairs that were way too big for normal people. Around, the room weapons hung on the walls. Plasma guns that could melt through steel swords made from materials harder than diamond. Energy shields that could stop a spaceship. These were tools made for killing. Most of the contestants were twice as tall, as a grown human man, and 3 times as heavy. Their muscles bulged under armor that looked like it could stop a meteor. Some had claws instead of hands. Others had extra arms or tentacles. A few had skin that looked like rock or metal. Then there was Kim Nari. She was 12 years old and sat in a chair so big that her feet could not touch the floor. She wore her school uniform with a white shirt and blue skirt. Her black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she had a small backpack. Beside her, instead of looking at weapons or preparing for battle, she was playing a game on a small electronic device. A blue-skinned creature with 6 arms looked down at her. His name was Vex, and he was from a planet where the gravity was so strong that normal humans would be crushed flat in seconds. His people were born warriors who started fighting before they could walk. "What is this tiny thing doing here?" Vex asked his friend Granite, who was made of living stone and stood 8 feet tall. Did someone's pet escape from their ship? Nari looked up from her game. Her dark eyes were calm and showed no fear at all. "I am here to win," she said in a voice that sounded like she was talking about the weather. Then she went back to her game. The other contestants burst out laughing. The sound echoed through the room like thunder. There were 20 fighters total, and each one had destroyed armies and conquered planets. Bloodfang was a wolf-like creature from an ice world who could freeze enemies. With his breath, Stormclaw was a bird warrior whose wings could create hurricanes. Razor was an insect being whose shell could deflect laser beams. Every single one of them had killed thousands of enemies in battle. They had fought in wars that lasted decades and won victories that made them legends on their home worlds. Some had even destroyed entire civilizations that tried to stand against them. And here was a human child who looked like she should be in school, learning math. The tournament announcer appeared above them as a shimmering hologram. It was Commissioner Floats, a jellyfish-like creature that had organized the Death Games for over a century. His body was transparent and glowed with different colors when he spoke. "Welcome, warriors, to the 2387 Death Games," he said in a voice that boomed through the room. "The rules are simple. You will face 5 challenges. Each challenge will eliminate the weakest fighters. The last one standing wins everything. The first challenge begins in 1 hour as the contestants were led to preparation chambers. Nari walked past a section where spectators could watch through thick glass barriers. A group of humans had come to see the games, and one of them recognized her immediately. "Nari, what are you doing here?" shouted a man named Park Dong-hyun through the barrier. "Where are your parents?" Nari waved at him like she was greeting a neighbor. "Hi, Uncle Dong-hyun. Mom and Dad think I am at space camp. Do not worry. I will be home for dinner." Dong-hyun's face turned white as paper. He knew that all humans were considered strange by the rest of the galaxy because they thought differently than other species, but this was complete madness. A child had somehow entered the most dangerous competition in the universe. He tried to contact the tournament officials, but it was too late. The Death Games had officially begun, and once they started, they could not be stopped for any reason. This was a law that had never been broken in 1,000 years. Her preparation chamber. Nari sat cross-legged on the floor, still playing her electronic game. A medical robot flew over to scan her body and announced her information to the crowd watching on screens across the galaxy. "Human female," it said in a mechanical voice. "Age 12. Earth years. Height 4 feet 8 inches. Weight 85 pounds. No visible weapons. No armor detected." The crowd watching in the arena started laughing so hard that some aliens fell out of their seats. Betting stations immediately opened with odds of 10,000 to 1 against the human child. Some creatures bet on her as a joke, thinking it would be funny to waste a few credits on the impossible. What they did not know was that Nari had been training her whole life, but not in fighting. She had been training in something much more dangerous than combat. She had been learning to think. Human children, especially ones like Nari, had brains that worked differently from adult minds. They could see patterns where others saw only chaos. They found solutions where others saw only problems. Their minds had not yet learned to be afraid of the impossible. The first challenge was announced over the arena speakers. Contestants would enter the Maze of Agony, a giant puzzle filled with deadly traps and hungry monsters. They had 1 hour to reach the center. Anyone who failed would be killed by the creatures inside. The maze changed its layout every 10 minutes, making it impossible to memorize. As Nari finally put away her game and stood up, she cracked her knuckles like she was getting ready to solve a math problem. Finally, she said to herself, "Something fun to do." The other contestants were busy putting on heavy armor and checking their weapons. Vex loaded his plasma cannons with enough power to destroy a building. Bloodfang sharpened his claws until they could cut through steel. Stormclaw practiced his flying attacks that could create tornadoes. Nari walked to the starting line with empty hands. She had no weapons, no armor, and no plan that anyone could see. She looked around at the maze entrance with the same expression she used when looking at a new puzzle book commissioner. Floats appeared again above the contestants. His jellyfish body glowed, bright red with excitement. "Contestants, you have 1 hour to reach the center of the Maze of Agony. The maze is filled with creatures that have not eaten in weeks. Anyone who fails to reach the center will be eliminated permanently. Begin." The massive gates opened with a sound like breaking mountains. 19 warriors charged into the maze, roaring battle cries and ready to fight anything that got in their way. Their footsteps shook the ground and their weapons glowed with deadly energy. Nari walked in calmly with her hands in her pockets. She looked around with curiosity instead of fear, like she was exploring a new playground at school. Within minutes, the sounds of battle came from inside the maze. Screams, explosions, and inhuman roars filled the air. The watching crowd saw their favorite warriors fighting desperately against mechanical spiders, the size of cars. Acid-spitting plants tried to dissolve them, while shadow creatures that could change shape attacked from every direction. But the cameras could not find Nari anywhere. She had simply disappeared. "Where is the human child?" Commissioner Floats wondered out loud as he checked his monitoring systems. Nobody knew that Nari had already discovered something the maze designers never expected. The maze was not random at all. It followed a mathematical pattern based on prime numbers, instead of fighting the monsters. She was walking through passages that avoided them completely. She had figured out that the creatures were controlled by computers, and the computers followed rules. If you knew the rules, you could predict where the monsters would be and where they would not be. After 58 minutes, 17 contestants came out of the maze. They were covered in blood and barely able to stand. Vex was missing his left arm. Bloodfang had lost half his fur to acid burns. Stormclaw's wings were torn, and he could barely fly. 2 contestants had not made it out at all. As Commissioner Floats prepared to declare the challenge finished, a small figure walked out of the center exit. It was Nari, completely clean and unhurt. She was eating what looked like a sandwich. "Sorry, I am late," she said cheerfully. "I stopped to have lunch with some really nice robot spiders. They are not mean at all once you figure out how to talk to them in computer language." The entire arena fell completely silent. 50,000 alien spectators stared at a 12-year-old human girl who had just done the impossible. She had solved the unsolvable maze without fighting a single battle. Commissioner Float's jellyfish body turned pale. Howie whispered. Nari looked up at him and smiled. "It was just a puzzle," she said, "like the ones in my math book at school." The second challenge would take place inside the gravity chamber, a massive round room that looked like the inside of a giant metal ball. The chamber was as big as a football stadium and filled with floating platforms, spinning obstacles and walls. Made of pure energy, Commissioner floats appeared above the 17 remaining contestants. His jellyfish body was still pale from shock after watching Nari solve the impossible maze. The crowd in the arena was buzzing with excitement because nobody could believe what they had just seen. "This is the gravity chamber," Commissioner Floats announced, trying to sound confident again. "Inside this room, the pull of gravity will change every 2 minutes. Sometimes you will feel heavy, like you are carrying rocks. Sometimes you will float like you are underwater. Sometimes gravity will pull you toward the walls or ceiling instead of the floor." He pointed to 5 glowing crystals scattered throughout the chamber. Each contestant must collect all 5 energy crystals before time runs out. The last 5 fighters to collect their crystals will be eliminated from the death games forever. The 17 warriors looked through the thick glass windows at the chamber inside. Floating platforms moved in slow circles while others spun like tops. Energy barriers flickered on and off in patterns that hurt to look at. The whole room seemed to twist and bend in ways that made no sense. Most of the contestants were already tired and hurt from the first challenge. Vex had gotten a new mechanical arm to replace the one he lost, but it was clearly bothering him. Every few seconds he would flex it and wince in pain. Bloodfang was limping on 3 legs because acid had burned his front paw. Granite had cracks running through his stone body like he might fall apart. Stormclaw tried to spread his torn wings, but they would not open properly. 3 other warriors showed signs of serious injuries that made them move slowly and carefully. Nari sat on the floor playing a different game on her electronic device. This one looked exactly like the chamber they were about to enter. It had the same floating platforms, the same spinning obstacles, and the same energy barriers. "Is that child playing a game of our next challenge?" asked Granite the rock creature as he looked over her shoulder with his glowing red eyes. "Oh, this." Nari looked up with an innocent expression on her face. "It is just a puzzle game I downloaded yesterday. It is called Space Jump. Adventure, want to try?" She held out the device to Granite, who took it carefully in his massive stone hands. He looked at the screen and saw a perfect copy of the chamber they were about to enter. The game even had the same pattern of gravity changes and moving platforms. "How did you get this?" he asked in amazement. "The tournament's Wi-Fi password is DeathGames2387. Nari explained like she was talking about homework. "I connected to their computer system during the first challenge to download some new games. This one looked fun, so I got it." Granite stared at her in complete disbelief. While all the other contestants had been fighting for their lives in the deadly maze, this human child had somehow broken into the tournament's secret files. She had turned their most dangerous challenges into entertainment. The chamber doors opened with a hiss of air and the contestants walked inside. Immediately, the gravity shifted to 3 times normal. Earth gravity making every step feel like walking through thick mud. The bigger warriors adapted quickly because their bodies were built for heavy gravity worlds. But as they jumped toward the first floating platforms, the gravity suddenly reversed. Everyone found themselves flying toward the ceiling. At dangerous speeds, chaos filled the chamber as 17 warriors crashed into walls and barriers. Stormclaw managed to use his damaged wings to control his flight, even though they were torn and bleeding. Others were not so lucky. Bloodfang tried to dig his claws into the smooth metal walls, but they just scratched uselessly across the surface. Vex fired his mechanical arm like a grappling hook, but missed his target and spun out of control. Nari, however, seemed to float gently upward. Her body was relaxed and her movements were smooth and controlled. As the other contestants struggled with the sudden change in direction, she pushed off walls and platforms with perfect timing. She moved through the chamber like she was swimming through air instead of fighting against impossible forces. "How is she doing that?" demanded Vex as he watched the human child collect her first crystal while he was still trying to figure out which way was up. The answer was simple but amazing. Nari had spent the last hour playing her game and memorizing the gravity change patterns. Every shift was predictable, following a sequence based on how fast the chamber rotated. While the other warriors were surprised by each change, Nari was ready for them before they happened. As the gravity shifted to 10 times normal Earth weight, the heavier contestants found themselves pressed against whatever surface they were near. Some of them could barely breathe as their own body weight tried to crush their internal organs. Granite actually did better in high gravity because his stone body was built for it. but others struggled to move at all. Bloodfang was whimpering as he tried to lift his head. Stormclaw was completely pinned to the floor with his wings spread, flat and useless. Nari had positioned herself perfectly. When the crushing gravity hit, she was already next to her second crystal. She simply reached out and picked it up while others could not even lift their arms. "This is impossible, Commissioner," Floats muttered as he watched his monitoring screens. Her heart rate has not even gone up. She is calmer than when she was sitting in the waiting room. The crowd in the arena was going crazy. Some aliens were throwing their hats in the air. Others were jumping up and down and screaming. Betting stations were updating their odds every few seconds as more people put money on the human child. By the time the challenge was half finished, Nari had collected 4 of her 5 crystals. The other contestants were still struggling with their second or third. Several had gotten new injuries as the gravity changes threw them into spinning obstacles or energy barriers. One warrior got caught between 2 platforms when gravity reversed and was crushed like a bug. Another tried to grab an energy crystal during high gravity and got his arm stuck in an energy barrier that burned him badly. The final gravity change was the most extreme 25 times normal Earth gravity. Most contestants could not even lift their heads, let alone move toward the remaining crystals. Bloodfang was crying as his own weight threatened to break his bones. Stormclaw's wings were pressed so flat against the floor that they looked like they might never work again, and Nari had planned for this too. Her final crystal was positioned directly above a gravity control device, a spot where the artificial gravity field was actually weakest because of technical problems. While everyone else felt crushing force, she was in a pocket of almost normal gravity. She walked over and picked up her 5th crystal like she was picking flowers in a garden. Then she strolled calmly to the exit door while the other contestants were still trapped by the heavy gravity challenge. "Complete," she announced as she pressed the exit button. The gravity immediately returned to normal and the exhausted warriors collapsed in relief. Some of them were crying from pain. Others were unconscious from the stress. 5 of them had not managed to collect all their crystals. 3 alien warriors whose names sounded like static when they tried to speak, plus 2 others who had been hurt too badly in the first challenge to move properly during the gravity changes, as the 5 failed contestants were removed from the competition. Commissioner Float studied video recordings of Nari's performance. Every single movement had been calculated. Every position had been chosen with perfect timing. It was not luck or special powers. It was pure intelligence, applied to solving problems. Sir, his assistant Blink approached him nervously. "The betting odds have changed completely. The human child is now the favorite to win the entire tournament." "That is impossible," Commissioner Floats replied. But his voice shook. "That child is just 12 years old." "Yes, sir," Blink continued, "but she is a human child. And according to our research files, human children have a mental ability that adult humans lose when they grow up. They can recognize complex patterns at levels that seem impossible when they are not worried about being afraid." Commissioner Floats looked at the small figure walking calmly toward the next preparation area. She had not even broken a sweat. "Are you telling me," Floats said slowly, "that we have accidentally allowed the most dangerous type of intelligence in the galaxy to enter our death tournament?" "It appears so, sir." "What should we do about this problem?" Commissioner Floats was quiet for a long moment. The death games had never been stopped once they began. The tournament was broadcast to trillions of beings across the galaxy. There would be riots and wars if they tried to remove a contestant without a good reason. "We continue," he decided, "but make the next challenges much harder, much harder." As Nari settled into her preparation chamber for the 3rd challenge, she got a video message from her parents back on Earth. Her mother, Kim Soo-young, appeared on the screen looking very worried and upset. "Nari, Uncle Dong-hyun called us. Are you really in some kind of fighting tournament? You need to come home right now." Nari smiled and waved at the camera. "Hi, Mom. Do not worry. I am not fighting anyone. I am just solving puzzles. Really fun puzzles. I will be home soon. I promise." Her father, Kim Tae-woo, leaned into the picture. "Sweetheart, the news is saying you are in something called the Death Games. That sounds very dangerous." The 3rd challenge was completely different from anything the Death Games had ever used before. Commissioner Floats had decided that if physical strength could not stop the human child, then maybe mental torture would work better. 12 contestants remained after the gravity chamber challenge. 5 warriors had been eliminated, and the survivors looked exhausted and beaten. Their bodies were covered in bruises, and several had bandages wrapped around broken bones. Commissioner Floats floated. Above them, his jellyfish body glowing with angry red colors. "This is the psychic battlefield," he announced in a voice that echoed through the preparation chamber. "Your own minds will create the world around you. Your fears, your anger, your worst memories will all become real and try to destroy you." The alien warriors looked nervous. Psychological warfare was often worse than physical combat because you could not fight your own thoughts with weapons or armor. In this challenge, their own brains would be turned against them. You must navigate through your personal nightmare and reach the center where a single golden key waits. Commissioner Floats continued. "Only one contestant can take the key. Everyone else will be eliminated permanently. Your own mind will decide if you are strong enough to survive." Nari raised her hand like she was asking a question in school. "Excuse me. Mr. Floats, yes. Human child. If our fears become real, what happens to someone who is not afraid of anything?" The other contestants laughed, but it was not happy laughter. Everyone was afraid of something. Even the most dangerous killers in the galaxy had nightmares that woke them up screaming. "Everyone has fears," Commissioner Floats replied confidently. "The psychic field will find them and use them against you." Nari shrugged her shoulders. "Okay, I was just wondering." The contestants were fitted with metal headsets that had wires connected to a giant computer. The headsets would read their thoughts and create virtual worlds based on what they found inside their minds. Each warrior was placed in a separate pod that looked like a sleeping chamber as the virtual reality system activated. 11 fighters found themselves trapped in landscapes created from their worst nightmares and deepest fears. Vex appeared in a burning city filled with the screams of his family. He was reliving the day his home planet was destroyed by enemy forces. The buildings around him were melting and the ground was covered with the bodies of everyone he had ever loved. Bloodfang stood in an endless desert where the sun was so hot it burned away his fur and skin. He could feel himself dying of thirst while mirages showed him water that disappeared when he tried to reach it. Granite found himself slowly crumbling apart. His stone body was turning to sand grain by grain. He could feel pieces of himself falling away, and knew that soon there would be nothing left of him. Each warrior had to fight through memories of their worst moments. Their guilt over things they had done wrong. Their shame about times they had been weak. Their terror of death and pain and loneliness. Some contestants were frozen in place, unable to move because the fear was too strong. Others flew into blind rages, attacking enemies that were not really there but only made their psychological wounds deeper. But Nari found herself standing in what looked like her elementary school classroom back on Earth. Sunlight was coming through the windows and she could hear children playing outside during recess time. The room smelled like chalk and books and the apple her teacher always ate during lunch. She said to herself, "This is actually very nice." She walked over to the teacher's desk and sat down in the big chair. Then, she pulled out what looked like a pencil and paper. But instead of doing homework, she began drawing a map of the virtual space around her. The psychic computer was trying to find her fears, but it kept running into something unexpected. Instead of terror, it found curiosity. Instead of anxiety, it found interest. When the system tried to show her scary monsters, Nari would stop and ask questions about how they were made. When it created dark, threatening places, she would explore them like they were fascinating new playgrounds to discover. "Why is she not afraid?" Commissioner Floats demanded as he watched her vital signs on his monitoring screens. The psychic field should be crushing her mind with overwhelming terror. His technician observer had multiple eyes that could see in different dimensions. "Sir, her brain patterns are very unusual. When most living things encounter something unknown, their fear response activates first. But her curiosity response is so powerful that it completely blocks out the fear reaction." Meanwhile, in the virtual battlefield, the other contestants were fighting desperately through their personal nightmares. Several had already collapsed, their minds overwhelmed by psychological trauma they could not handle. The competition was eliminating itself as warriors faced memories they had tried to forget for years. Nari, however, had figured out the real truth about the challenge. She was not just in a random virtual space. She was inside a shared mind where all the contestants' thoughts were connected together. She could actually sense the others' pain and terror bleeding through the barriers between their individual nightmares. "Oh, you poor things," she said softly, as she felt the fear and agony coming. From her fellow contestants, you are all so scared and hurt. Instead of walking toward the golden key at the center, Nari began moving toward the other contestants' psychological landscapes. When she found Vex trapped in his burning city nightmare, she simply walked up to him through the flames. "Hi," she said cheerfully. "This is not real." "You know." Vex spun around, his mechanical arm crackling with electricity. "Stay back," he screamed. "I will not let them burn again. I have to save them this time. Nobody is burning." Nari explained patiently. "Look, watch this." She reached out and touched one of the burning buildings. Instead of hot flames, her hand passed through a harmless light projection. "See, it is just pictures and sounds. Your family is safe on their new planet." The psychological construct began to fall apart as Vex's rational mind started working again. The burning city faded away, replaced by a calm, gray space that felt peaceful and quiet. "How did you do that?" Vex asked, staring at her in complete amazement. "I just paid attention," Nari replied. "Fear makes you stop thinking clearly. But if you stay curious instead of scared, you can figure out what is really happening." She moved on to help Bloodfang, showing him that his desert nightmare was just a loop of repeated images that played over and over. She helped Granite understand that his crumbling body was just a symbol, not reality. One by one, she freed the other contestants from their psychological prisons. "This has never happened before," Commissioner Floats muttered as he watched his elimination challenge turn into a rescue mission. "She is not trying to win. She is trying to help everyone else." Sir Observer reported, his multiple eyes blinking rapidly. "If she continues this pattern, all remaining contestants will reach the center at the same time. Our elimination rules do not have instructions for this situation." But Nari had already thought about that problem. When all 12 contestants reached the center of the virtual space, together they found not one golden key but 12 keys, one for each of them. "I redesigned the challenge," Nari explained as the other warriors stared in shock. "The original version was mean. It was trying to hurt people by making them remember bad things. So I changed the computer code to make it fair instead." Commissioner Float's voice boomed through the virtual space. "Contestant changes to challenge rules are not allowed." "I did not change the rules," Nari replied innocently. "I just fixed the software. There were lots of mistakes in the fear response programs. Also, your computer security was really easy to break. You should probably get better protection, as the contestants were disconnected from the virtual reality system." Commissioner Floats faced a serious problem. Technically, all 12 had completed the challenge successfully, but the death games were supposed to eliminate people, not bring them together. "What do we do now?" Blink asked nervously, as he watched the group of warriors talking to each other instead of threatening each other. Somehow, the human child had turned his elimination tournament into a team-building exercise. The contestants were sharing stories about their nightmares and comforting each other instead of preparing for battle. "We make the 4th challenge impossible," Commissioner Floats decided grimly. Even for her. But as he watched Nari laughing with her new friends, he wondered if anything was truly impossible for a 12-year-old human who refused to be afraid of the unknown. The crowd in the arena was cheering louder than ever. They had come to watch violence and death, but instead, they were seeing something much more powerful. They were watching enemies become friends and fear transform into hope. And at the center of it all was a small girl who believed that the best way to win was to help everyone else succeed too. The 4th challenge was Commissioner Float's masterpiece of cruelty. The temporal fortress stood before the 12 remaining contestants, like a nightmare made of metal and energy. It was a massive building that seemed to exist in several different times at once. Parts of the fortress moved in slow motion while other sections flickered in and out of reality. Some walls were solid, while others were see-through. Some rooms were upside down, while others spun like wheels. The whole structure hurt to look at because it twisted through dimensions that normal minds could not understand. This fortress was designed by the galaxy's greatest scientists as a puzzle that could never be solved. Commissioner Floats announced his jellyfish body glowing, with evil satisfaction. It exists in multiple time streams at the same time. You must navigate through rooms where time moves at different speeds, solve puzzles that require you to change the past to affect the present and reach the fortress's core. He paused dramatically, letting the impossible nature of the challenge sink in. Only 4 contestants may pass through the portal at the center to reach the final challenge. The fortress itself will decide who is worthy and who must die. The 12 fighters stood at the fortress entrance looking up at the structure that seemed to bend reality around itself. Vex flexed his mechanical arm nervously, while Bloodfang whimpered at the sight of rooms that existed yesterday and tomorrow, but not today. Granite tried to understand how a building could be in multiple times at once, but his stone brain was not designed for such complex thoughts. Stormclaw folded his repaired wings tight against his body, because the shifting dimensions made him feel sick. Nari tilted her head to one side, studying the pattern of time distortions that rippled across the fortress walls like waves on water. "Oh, I see what this is," she said calmly. "It is a 4-dimensional puzzle box." Vex, who had become protective of the human child after she saved him from his nightmare, knelt down beside her. "Can you solve it, little one?" "Maybe," Nari replied thoughtfully, "but it will take some time. And the challenge says only 4 people can go to the next round." The other contestants gathered around her. Over the past 3 challenges, they had all learned to respect the small human. She had shown them that being smart was more powerful than being strong, and that being kind worked better than being cruel. "We could work together," suggested Bloodfang, his voice much gentler than it had been at the start of the tournament. "Help you figure it out, then decide who should move forward." Granite nodded his massive stone head. "The child helped all of us when we were trapped in our fears. It is only right that we help her now." But Nari was shaking her head. "That is not how this works," she explained patiently. "The fortress is not really testing us one by one. It is testing us as a group working together." She pointed to symbols carved into the fortress walls that glowed with temporal energy. "See those marks? They are not random decorations. They are instructions. The fortress was built to be solved by multiple people working together across different time periods." The other contestants looked confused, but Nari was already walking toward the entrance. "Come on, I will show you how it works." Inside the fortress, the group found their first temporal chamber. It was a room where time moved normally in the center but slowed down near the walls and sped up near the ceiling. A series of pressure plates needed to be pushed down at exactly the same moment, but they were scattered across the different time zones. "Okay," Nari said like a teacher explaining homework. "Granite, you are really heavy, so you need to stand on the slow time plate near the wall. Your weight will keep it pressed down even when time is moving slowly there." She turned to Stormclaw. "You can fly up to the fast time plates near the ceiling. Your reflexes are quick enough to handle the speed increase without getting confused." She continued giving directions, positioning each contestant in the time zone that matched their natural abilities perfectly. Within minutes, they had activated all the pressure plates at once, and the door to the next chamber opened with a deep rumbling sound. "How did you know that would work?" asked Vex as they moved deeper into the fortress. "I watched the time flow patterns," Nari replied. "They are not random. They are designed to need different types of people working together. The fortress was not built to keep us out. It was built to test if we could cooperate." As they went further into the fortress, the challenges became much more complex. They found rooms where actions in one time stream affected what happened in another, puzzles that required contestants to trust each other completely. Obstacles that could only be overcome by combining everyone's special abilities in one chamber. Nari had to solve a math equation while Bloodfang performed the physical actions that her solution required. But Bloodfang was in a time stream 3 minutes ahead of Nari. He had to act based on faith that she would give him the right answer before she had even seen the problem. In another room, all 12 contestants had to move through a maze where each person's path was only visible to the person walking behind them. They had to guide each other while walking backwards, trusting completely in their teammates' directions. Commissioner Floats watched in growing anger as his impossible fortress was systematically conquered by teamwork and trust. "This is not how the death games are supposed to work," he complained to his assistants. "There should be fighting. There should be death. There should be only one winner," Sir Observer reported nervously. "The fortress's central chamber is responding. The portal is opening for all 12 contestants. That cannot happen. Only 4 are allowed to pass through." "Actually," Sir Observer said very carefully, "I have been reading the original challenge rules. You said only 4 contestants may pass through the portal, but you did not say that 12 people could not pass through if they found a way to count as 4 in the fortress's core chamber." Nari stood before a shimmering portal that was indeed only big enough for 4 normal-sized people, but she was smiling with the same expression she used when she solved a particularly tricky puzzle. "I figured it out," she announced to the others. "We do not all have to go through separately." She looked at Granite, the largest of the contestants. "Can you carry me on your shoulders?" Then she turned to Stormclaw. "Can you sit on Granite's back?" Finally to Vex. "Can your mechanical arms stretch out to carry 3 other people?" Within minutes they had formed a living pyramid. Granite carried 4 people on his massive stone frame. Vex extended mechanical arms supported 3 more contestants. Stormclaw's strong wings held 2 others, and the remaining fighters linked together in a carefully balanced formation. Technically, they were now 4 units instead of 12 individual contestants as they squeezed through the portal together. Commissioner Floats was waiting on the other side. His jellyfish body was quivering with rage. "This is not how the death games work," he declared angrily. "There must be conflict. There must be elimination. There must be death and destruction." Nari looked up at him with the same patient expression she used when talking to confused adults. "But why?" she asked simply. "Is it not better when everyone wins instead of everyone losing?" The arena fell completely silent. Across the galaxy, billions of viewers who had expected to watch violence and murder found themselves watching something they had never seen before: perfect cooperation between natural enemies. People who had been at war for centuries were working together. Creatures who normally ate each other were sharing their strengths. Warriors who had destroyed planets were protecting the weak. "The final challenge," Commissioner Float said through gritted teeth, "will be different. I will make sure of that." But as he looked at the group of 12 contestants who had become a family, he wondered if he had already lost control of his own tournament. The crowd was cheering louder than ever before. They had come to see the death games, but instead they were witnessing the birth of something entirely new, something that might change the galaxy forever, and at the center of it all was a 12-year-old human girl who refused to believe that winning meant someone else had to lose. The final challenge took place in the center of the great arena, where billions of beings across the galaxy could watch on their screens. Commissioner Floats had given up trying to follow the traditional death games rules. If cooperation was ruining his tournament, then he would create a challenge that made working together impossible. The 12 contestants found themselves standing in a circular room with 13 stone pedestals arranged around the edges, like numbers on a clock. 12 of the pedestals held beautiful crystal orbs that glowed with soft rainbow light. The 13th pedestal stood empty in the very center of the room. "This is the final selection," Commissioner Floats announced, his voice booming across the arena and into space where trillions of creatures were watching. "Each of you may take 1 crystal orb. Whoever holds an orb when time runs out will be declared a winner and receive their share of the great prize." The contestants looked at each other uncertainly. After everything they had been through together, the idea of competing against each other felt wrong. They had become a family of warriors who trusted each other completely. But here is the twist. Commissioner Floats continued with evil satisfaction. In his voice, "There are only 12 orbs and 13 pedestals. One of you must choose to take nothing. That person will be eliminated permanently and removed from existence forever." The arena fell silent as the horrible truth sank in. After surviving 4 deadly challenges together, one of them would have to sacrifice themselves so the others could live. Furthermore, Commissioner Floats added, "You have exactly 60 seconds to make your choices. Anyone who has not taken an orb when time expires will also be eliminated. There's no time to discuss or plan. You must choose now. A countdown timer appeared floating in the air above them like a giant clock. 60, 59, 58, 57. The other contestants began moving slowly toward the crystal orbs, but their hearts were heavy with sadness. Vex reached toward one orb but kept looking back at Nari with worry in his mechanical eyes. Bloodfang stopped halfway to his chosen pedestal because he could not bear the thought of someone dying. Granite had not moved at all. His stone face showed an expression of deep pain as he realized that their journey together might end with tragedy. 44, 43, 42, take the orbs. Stormclaw called out desperately. We can figure this out afterward. But Nari was shaking her head as she studied the room carefully. Wait, she said in a voice that carried to every corner of the arena. Look at the pedestals more closely. The other contestants stopped and looked where she was pointing. The 12 outer pedestals were indeed identical, each one holding a glowing crystal orb. But the 13th pedestal in the center was completely different. The 13th pedestal is not meant for an orb, Nari explained quickly. Look at its shape. It is designed to hold a person, not a crystal. Tintoir. 29, 28, 27. What are you saying? Vex demanded as precious seconds ticked away. I am saying the challenge is not about choosing who gets eliminated, Nari replied calmly. It is about choosing who gets to be the leader who connects everyone else together. She walked confidently to the central pedestal and stepped onto it. Immediately lines of pure light appeared, connecting her position to all 12 outer pedestals. The entire chamber filled with warm golden energy that made everyone feel peaceful and strong. The final challenge is not about competition, Nari announced, her young voice somehow reaching every being in the galaxy. It is about leadership. Someone has to be willing to stand in the center and help coordinate everyone else. 15, 14, 13, 12. Understanding dawned on the other contestants' faces like sunrise after a long dark night. They quickly moved to the outer pedestals, each one claiming a crystal orb. As they did, the lines of light grew brighter, and the entire chamber began to vibrate with harmonic music that sounded like angels singing. The crystal orbs pulsed in perfect rhythm like 12 hearts beating as one. The energy flowing between them created patterns of light so beautiful that many viewers across the galaxy began to cry with joy. 4, 3, 2. One time expired and the arena fell completely silent. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Commissioner Floats stared at the display in complete shock. But there is supposed to be only one winner. He stammered. That is how the death games have always worked. Maybe the death games were working wrong, Nari said simply from her position in the center of the constellation of light. Maybe the real challenge was figuring out how to make everyone win instead of making everyone lose. The crystal orbs began to pulse faster, and suddenly the arena was filled with holographic images showing the home worlds of each contestant. But these were not pictures of war or destruction. They were images of peace and happiness and prosperity. The prize, Nari continued, is not about ruling over others with fear and violence. It is about helping others rule themselves with wisdom and kindness. As this truth spread through the arena and across the galaxy, something amazing happened. The spectators began to cheer, not for blood and death like they had come to see, but for friendship and cooperation and hope. Aliens who had been enemies for thousands of years looked at each other and wondered if maybe there was a better way to solve their problems. Creatures who had spent their lives fighting began to think about what they could build together instead of what they could destroy. Commissioner Floats found himself surrounded by crowds of billions demanding that this new format become permanent. The death games, which had celebrated violence and hatred for countless centuries, had been transformed into something completely different by a 12-year-old human child who refused to accept that anyone had to lose for someone else to win. In the days that followed, reporters from across the galaxy came to interview the contestants. Each warrior had returned to their home world not as a conqueror, but as a teacher. They shared the lessons they had learned about cooperation and trust and the power of working together. Nari returned home to Earth, where her parents were waiting at the spaceport. Her mother, Kim Soo-young, hugged her tightly, while her father, Kim Tae-woo, shook his head in amazement. You are grounded for a month, young lady. her mother said firmly. For entering an intergalactic tournament without permission. Nari smiled and hugged her parents back. I am sorry I worried you. But I had to help my friends. They were so scared and I knew I could figure out how to make everything okay. Her father looked at the news reports showing celebrations across the galaxy as former enemies signed peace treaties and began working together on projects to help their people. You certainly did that, sweetheart. You changed the entire universe. The Death Games were officially renamed the Unity Games and new rules were created. Entry was now restricted to those who could demonstrate not just strength or skill, but the ability to help others succeed. The goal was no longer to eliminate opponents but to solve challenges together. Commissioner Floats, after much thought and many conversations with wise advisors, decided that perhaps a 12-year-old human had taught him the most important lesson of his very long life. True victory was not about defeating others but about lifting everyone up together. And Nari she went back to school where she got perfect grades on her math test and spent lunch break helping 3 classmates understand fractions. Her teacher, Mrs. Park, noticed that Nari seemed different somehow, more confident and peaceful, like she had learned something very important about how the world really worked. When her friends asked her about her adventure in space, Nari just smiled and said, "It was fun. I got to solve some really interesting puzzles and make some great friends." The galaxy had learned something that day. Never underestimate a human child with a curious mind and a kind heart. They might just change everything without even trying. Very hard. And sometimes the best way to win is to make sure everyone else wins too.